woke up in a lucid dream. Now we're hunting for the shards. We might be an oddball team, but at least we've got no bards. World Walkers.
I'm Pedro, the GM and creator of World Walkers. In our last episode, Vasa found herself in the past, where the city of Tremessa had just fallen under attack by a group of time manipulators calling themselves the Chronos. With her help, the city survived, but not before ending up in the Grey. Together with the city's leader, Orden, Vasa spent 10 years working on a way to return home. Risking their memories and their continued existence, they used Tremessa's memory crystals to break through the barrier of the Grey. Now, we find out whether or not they were successful. As he begins the chant, you remember it more and more, and it builds and builds and builds, and finally at its peak, there is this crackling blue energy, the same blue energy that hit you, what started all of this, and it's racing all along the crystal, and then finally it leaps out and it hits each crystal, like lightning jumps from crystal to crystal to crystal, until you're all kind of networked together into the same main crystal, and then the lightning builds and builds and builds, and there's a huge flash of light. Before you get your sight back, you hear the chirping of birds, and the white light kind of gives way to the bright light that hits your eyelids on a Sunday, on a summer morning. And as you all gain your senses back and clear your eyes and look around, you are back. You're back in Obrimos. You brought your whole city with you. Everyone starts to cheer and celebrate. And Orden comes and hugs you, and he just breathes a deep sigh of relief and looks around happy.
So Vasa would accept the hug readily. You can clearly see the difference, braces. But her face, it's kind of dazed. It's not completely jubilant as everybody else who's cheering. In fact, if anything, she's kind of like, after her hug, she kind of pulls Orden back and she looks at him and she goes, "How is everybody? Is everybody okay? Orden, check them. How are they? Are they different?
He looks around. He's like, we're great. And everyone looks great except for Jenkins, who has like a look of concern on his face.
And she would say, "Jenkins, what is it?"
Do you not all sense that?
What?
Something feels wrong, off. Orden, you can... I need you to trust me on this. We need to burn more energy. And everyone kind of gasps and says, "What?" And he says, "Trust me. I need you to look through the timeline. First off, we need to know when we are. And second, I need you to look because something feels wrong. It just feels wrong. You don't feel that?" And everyone seems confused and getting a little scared. And Orden says, all right.
So Vasa would raise her hand and say, wait. No. She would kind of hold up her hand and say, everybody, she would say, "Jenkins, I need more than that. I need to know what you're feeling." And she would look at Orden as well as being like, "Do you feel it? Do you feel it?" And
Orden says, "I don't know what I feel now because now I'm just nervous." And he kind of laughs a little. And no, Jenkins is like, I am telling you something is wrong. Something is wrong and we need to know what it is. I'm not asking for you to burn everyone's crystal out, but if we can just offer a little bit more, just to look and see when we are.
Vas, well, if you look around, what does the city look like? Does it look like a healthy whole city that's
the
bright
city looks
and
the
full?
same. Like you brought the city with you.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't come back into the city. So it still looks like it's half created from the Grey. The grass is overrun. You can hear animals in the area.
Are we in the same setting as if we were where Tremessa was?
Yep.
And then Vasa, in seeing all this, she would say, we can find other people to ask what time it is. We do not need to burn our crystals to find. Jenkins, you don't know what you're asking.
I do. I would not ask.
And then Vasa would be like, why are you the only one feeling this? Why not Orden? Why not every one of these people?
And then he looks down, he looks back up, and he's like, because I no longer feel the gods. And everyone just kind of grows silent. And that makes you remember something. In your group, when we talked about chapels, remember?
Mm-hmm. There were so many gods. Like chapels and all that.
Right, but Brummelstone and Roberto didn't recognize what those buildings were. As if the idea of a temple or church was alien to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, then Vasa would say something, that's right. Just kind of as if to herself.
What?
And then she would say, my allies, they had no gods. From my time, they had no gods.
Well, that's fine. I mean, everyone makes mistakes.
And then Vasa would basically still kind of be slowly trying to talk herself. She'd be like, no, I don't think there are supposed to be gods. She's still kind of murmuring to herself, pacing back and forth.
Yeah. And he says, please, I'm begging you. We need to know what happened.
And then Vasa would...
And other people are getting worried too. Like, they actually want to know. Like, they're used to the idea of divine intervention.
Yeah. And then Vasa would turn and she would say, she would kind of be speaking to Jenkins, but also projecting her voice so that everybody hears. She says, in my time, I do not think there are gods. I do not think that we are in a wrong time. I think this is how it's supposed to be. And I know, and she kind of, obviously in her 10 years there, she would have kind of learned their lore a little bit, how their gods worked. And she would kind of say, I know it is hard to imagine, and she's specifically looking at Jenkins at this. I know it is hard to imagine life without them. I know that you must feel empty and frightened. But I think this is how it should be. I do not think we should search. We cannot spend more. Look, we are here. We are out. Like, we have ourselves. You are you. You are not the creatures I spoke of. Do not risk more. Do not risk more.
And he looks up at you, and he just looks shattered, and he has tears in his eyes, and he says, I'm just asking for a peek. We at least need to know where the Chronos are.
And then she would kind of grab his shoulders, and she would say, you and us, we have survived in the gray for 10 years. That is how strong we are. And today we are whole. We are out of the gray. You are strong enough to endure this. I am asking you as well, Jenkins. And everyone, please. We cannot drain further. Ask no more of our crystals. Embrace and celebrate what we have achieved here.
And Orden kind of walks up to him and he says, Jenkins, she's right. At the very least, if we can find more crystals and harvest them, they should grow in the area still, right? And Jenkins, he can't even answer. He can't even look anywhere. But he says, let's at least gather more resources before we burn the only resources we have left. And Jenkins just kind of sits down on the steps of the library, and everyone looks not just awkward, but like
it's like
he's kind of seeing their holy man so desolate has taken a toll on them, and everyone starts to disperse and pull away.
Mm-hmm. And then, so you said that like the location is exactly where Tremessa was, right?
Yeah.
All right. If you were to, is it on a hill? Is it in a valley? Where is it?
There's a set of rolling hills nearby, but it's pretty much just plains.
Mm-hmm. And then Vasa would she would be going around a little bit trying to perk up people's spirits, being like, look at the sky, and she'd kind of do that thing. But she'd eventually circle back to Orden, being kind of and converse with him quietly, being is there a way to use one crystal to try to discern where we are in time?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, basically, I mean, I can look as much as I need to, and if I need more energy, then I'd have to just get more energy. But he says, I see where you're going. And he pulls out his own crystal.
Yeah, and she pulls out hers as well.
And he says, let's go somewhere. And so you guys go back into the library and find one of the kind of small study rooms. And he has the large crystal. Because at some point, he kind of severed his link with the main crystal.
Mm-hmm.
And started developing his own smaller crystal so that he wasn't tied directly to the main crystal. And so the two of you lend a little bit more energy. And you can see in the reflection of the crystal different moments of time as he starts to kind of work and do that same chant and focus himself. And he's not looking at his own timeline anymore. He's looking at like Obrimos' timeline. And he's kind of gliding back and forth. And what you discover is that you learn that the Kronos will be killed.
Mm-hmm.
That's still far off in the future.
Mm-hmm.
You learn that the gods never existed.
Mm-hmm.
There's no trace of their existence. And when you guys find that out, Orden says he says that they must have done it, and he looks at you and says the Kronos must have wiped the gods out.
Mm-hmm.
They were the only things that would have ever been a threat to him. Why wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of just shakes his head, and he's like, we just need to look at one more thing. And he starts to glance forward into the future. And every time he looks forward, he finds this exact same place. The city's getting bigger and more full of life, like it's being rebuilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's purposely not looking for people. He's keeping that out. He's not looking to see what happens to us.
Mm-hmm.
He's just looking ahead and scurrying the area for crystals. And he sees that crystals become more and more plentiful the further you go in time. And at one point, he doesn't notice it because it's kind of like almost off in the background. But as he's flittering through, you're watching as well. And at one point, you see the plant and vine covered wall of the outer wall of the city. And you can see off in the distance your group approaching, including you.
Mm-hmm.
But he's just flipping through. And then he stops. And the energy in your crystals is pretty low, so you got to stop now.
Yeah.
Kind of
mm-hmm.
recharge.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "So that's it then."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I understand the Kronos thing, but if they die, let's try something.
And Vasa kind of looks at him because she knows that he's a bit of a scientist who sometimes gets lost with ideas faster than he is with practicality. And she says, "What?"
I'm not saying we'll do it right now, but you know what? Meet me for lunch tomorrow. I've got an idea.
Okay. So, they would separate at that point, and she would make her way to Jenkins to explain what they found, to at least console him with the fact that, yes, it may feel wrong, but it is not something that we could have changed. It appears to be the acts of the Kronos, and this is how the world is now.
He thanks you for your time, but you're not sure what kind of effect it had on him.
Mm-hmm.
Next day?
Mm-hmm.
So after rest, a celebratory dinner that Jenkins does not come to. The next day for lunch, you guys meet right outside of the city at a nice little pond that exists outside. And you are kind of watching him because he went around and he found some more crystals.
Mm-hmm.
And he has his staff. And at this point, he shows you something, and he takes several of the crystals, and he merges them into his own crystal, and the crystal becomes much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And then he takes his staff, and he fastens the crystal to the top of it, just like the ones in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Look at that. We can condense the energy and bring them together."
And Vasa, when she's looking at this, she has a very neutral expression. She's just like, and what does that mean?
Well, it means that we can power up our crystals, and that means we might be able to kind of jumpstart our research a little more. Watch this. And he walks over, and he throws some food on the ground, and gets a squirrel to approach him. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "You watching?"
Yes.
I was playing around with this last night. And he takes the staff, and he doesn't like jab into him, but he does, make a quick motion towards the squirrel, and he taps him with the crystal, and the squirrel just disappears.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "Eh?"
Vasa would be looking very stern.
Wait, just wait. And he kind of just puts his hand up, and after a few seconds, the squirrel just reappears as if nothing happened and keeps eating. Time jumps. Sending something just a little bit forward in time.
By the way, I thought you said that with the crystals that you can already move anywhere you want in time. It's just we couldn't do it in the gray because there weren't timelines.
And our crystals are, pretty weak right now. And I that was all theory craft. I've never been able to do it. All that research is true.
And then Vasa would say something like, "Does that mean you can charge my crystal so that I can return forward to my time?"
Better. So I don't know if you noticed. I don't know how well you can read timelines. We're still pretty far in the past. We're talking centuries. I say we all go together. Think of a farmer. Think of a farmer who had to grow a crop. Every year they grow a crop, right? They collect everything, and then they have to wait a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have to wait a year? Let's gather crystals. Make the jump. Gather crystals. Make the jump. Gather crystals. Make the jump. And we'll just start moving forward in time till we have enough crystals. We could actually bundle a tremendous amount of crystals together and use it to open a gateway to wherever we wanted to. We could even go back to our own times.
Vasa would be listening to this all very silently, not showing any signs of joining in on his excitement. Yeah. There is something to be said about letting life run its course, Orden. If you play and treat time so lightly, how are you so different from the Chronos that trivialized your lives and the timelines they ruled over?
It's the difference, honestly, between a traveling salesman and highway robbers. The Chronos are the highway robbers. They tell you who can go where, and they erase anyone that doesn't play the way they want to play. I just want to walk the road. I don't want to mess with anybody else's life. Anyone that wants to come with us, it's just a journey forward.
And then Vasa will kind of like bark out a humorless laugh. And she says, "Orden, I was a burglar and a rogue, and I can tell you, the biggest crooks are the salesmen."
Oh, well, hold on. Then I am...
And then she kind of shakes her head, and then she goes, "I need to jump forward to my time. Will you at least prioritize that for everything that I have given you and given your city? Will you at least first charge my crystal so that I can leave?"
It's going to take a few jumps because we're talking centuries, and that squirrel was 4 seconds.
Mm-hmm. And then she would just say,
"Yeah, let's
do that. Power my crystal," and she would just kind of look at him very hard in the eyes, and she would say, "Power my crystal first. Promise me that."
Least we can do.
Yes.
Absolutely. So he tells the rest of the people only what they have to know. He doesn't want to tell them like, "Hey guys, we could time travel." Like, you don't know if he's doing it because of his own sense of because he knows it's the right thing to do, or if he's like looking at you like, "This is what I can get away with."
Well, also would have actively been like, "Do not fill the people's minds with your wild theories. You know they could never hold them. Let them enjoy their life now. Let them, see what it is just to simply walk time as everyone else does before you give them such powers." Yeah. So she would be actively trying to encourage him to stifle as much of his theorizing out loud as possible.
Yep. And so he keeps it quiet. Now, you guys spend time gathering crystals, making a jump. You can't go very far, maybe like a year.
Mm-hmm.
But you take the whole city with you.
Wait, would we be taking the whole city with her? Because she would have disagreed with that. She would say, no, I want my crystal charged.
You want just him and you to go.
No, well, I mean, yes, she has to take him as like a chaperone thing.
Yeah.
But she wants all the energy, and she kind of, at this point, she would be using a little bit of the influence she has established over 10 years of their trust to pressure him a little bit, being like, no. And she would also justify as like saying, we should only risk ourselves and not the city before we have mastered this.
He says, let me throw this out there real quick. I agree with you. I owe you. It's time you're collecting your debt. I understand that. Here's my concern, and I'm not trying to play a game. This is honestly my concern. If we don't take them with us, then that means we're leaving Jenkins in charge.
Yeah, by the way, what is Jenkins' demeanor nowadays?
He's quiet. He doesn't talk to anybody.
Has he been active in his quote-unquote church at all, or as healer?
No, he closed the church. Okay.
And has he, so Vasa would have actually, periodically visited him because he's like an old friend and a mentor. And, does he seem bitter? Does he seem a shell of a person? How is he?
He is just quiet. He's dismissive. And he says that nothing matters because there's nothing after this life. So who cares?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would also say that it would not, at this time, now that the city is even before that, Vasa would have gone around sort of reestablishing a little bit of like an inner circle / chain of command. It wouldn't be just her and Orden running the city. She would have picked bright people and sort of taught them, common sense and how to influence people, and just made it almost more efficient, almost like, carrying her skills forward.
Yeah.
So she would have been like, oh no, Johnner can lead them. They trust Johnner, and if Johnner gets too reckless, there's always Ferris to pull him back.
And he says, if that is the way you want to do it, that's fine. But my concern is that Jenkins, I would just rather take everybody with us, because I guess what I'm trying to say is this: I worry that if we leave them behind, what if they become who we're worried about? Especially with Jenkins there to influence them. He's already has the ear of a number of people. Because there are people who aren't sure what happens when there's a world without gods. I've never been very religious, so it's not as hard on me. I mean, it's disturbing. Don't get me wrong. There's an entire section of our city that could turn. He says, but I don't want to force you to make a decision. Like more than the rest of us in a certain way, you have to live with every decision that's been made so far, especially if you get back home.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah. So Vasa looks at him and then says, only the two of us. And then she says, let's go find more crystals.
All right. So you are able to harvest and pull together crystals, and you're able to use that together to jump forward a couple years. Like, it was only a year with the entire city. It would have been, it's a number of years past that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not so bad. It still takes you a while. It takes you another 20 years of traveling.
Holy shit!
Jumping
Jesus.
Forward. Yeah. In that time...
Vasa's going to turn into Ertleby? Is that what this is going to be?
In that time, one of the effects that you have slowly noticed is that, first off, the town, much to your delight, it's fine.
Okay.
There is a point where Jenkins had to be executed. He tried to raise up a group that was going to force everyone to create basically everyone turn over their crystals and create a path back to the original timeline, even though that doesn't seem possible because you're stuck on this track.
Yeah.
And go back to the gods.
Yeah.
And he had to, and it was without you guys. You guys didn't need to stop him. Like, you jumped far enough ahead into the future to find out that there was an uprising and it was dealt with. And the council that you put together kept everything solidified. you continue jumping through time, and you see the town become bigger and better and more beautiful.
At some point, is Vasa accumulating the ability to make the jumps herself? Like she's picked up enough skills?
Right. So after a little while, after another couple of years, you have... He actually kind of jokingly gives you your own robe, and you have your own staff with your own crystal, which is large like his, and you're both able to go harvest, and then you always jump together to make sure you don't lose each other. But yeah, so you've made significant progress. You've jumped, even though it's been 20 years for you, which is a long time. You've jumped hundreds of years.
So we've almost become like a legendary figure, like, oh, it's those time travelers again, and like we're now interacting with like the children of the children of the children of the children of the council.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that the city knows who you are. Like every time you appear, you're welcomed back, and they take time to bring you back in and stuff like that. During this time, they've deconstructed the temples. There are no more temples anymore. You keep making jumps, and the one thing that you notice one time you guys jump, you've noticed that your skin, both of you, is starting to shrivel. Almost as if your body's aging faster than you are. Now, you don't feel it. You don't feel like you're becoming older per se. It's just that it's taking a toll on your visuals. And you remember you went to a local shop and you actually purchased a bunch of bandages so you could wrap yourselves up so no one would see what you guys look like. And maybe it wasn't until you saw yourself in the mirror that you remembered
what those original creatures look like.
Yeah.
Right. And even though Vasa, it would have, the moment that even, I would say that it was Orden who proposed the, no, actually, it would have been Vasa in a moment of epiphany, who, upon looking at her skin and seeing how they looked in the reflection of the water, she would have had that moment of epiphany being like, and Orden would have said something like, oh, we're going to scare people looking like this. And then Vasa would have said, we can cover ourselves in bandages, in like a very strange tone of voice, but not going into anything more than that.
Yeah.
And she would not have pointed out the explicit recognition to Orden. She would have just been like, all right, let's keep looking.
All right. One time you make a jump and you have been welcomed to the town. Everyone knows who you are. You have a celebratory dinner and stuff like that. And then that night, while you're having dinner, there is a knock on the door of the grand hall where you guys are celebrating, because you've returned, right? And someone jumps, excuse me, wipes his mouth off, runs back there, opens the door, and you hear a familiar voice say, hey, I smelled food and I'm really hungry. Do you mind if I come in? And he's like, sure. And he opens the door and he looks around and he's like, your name, sir? And he says, well, my name's Tompkins and I'm really hungry. And he says, all right, sure. Sure. And he brings him in and he sits down next to you, doesn't recognize you, and they bring him a plate of food and he just starts chowing down like he hasn't eaten in like maybe 2 weeks.
And Vasa's like staring at this, what does he look like? Old, young? What does he look like?
He looks just like when you first met him.
Like a little boy?
No.
Oh, okay.
Like when you first met him, in the beginning of the story, yeah.
And then she would have, if she wasn't sitting next to him, she would have risen and then gone to move and sit down firmly next to this chowing down lad.
Yeah, and he has like a turkey leg in his mouth and he's like, how are you?
And then she says, how old are you, boy?
And he looks at you and he says, He kind of shrugs and he feels awkward and he goes, would you believe me if I said I don't know? And he kind of just shrugs it off and keeps eating.
And then Vasa says, yes, I would. She also, after a moment, would say, what is your history, boy?
And he says, well, geez, as a kid, I used to come here all the time. We loved, well, it had a different name back then, but we used to love this town, and they had great books, and I always learned something new. I've just been in the area, so I stopped by again.
And then she says, how How are your parents? Your family?
And he kind of looks sad and he says, well, my mom and dad passed some time ago. I'm actually on my way to go pay tribute.
And then Vasa would say, have you lost many people?
And he looks like he doesn't know how to think about that. Like, and he looks confused. He says, I mean, I don't know, maybe. And he puts the thought of his head and just gets happy again and keeps eating.
And then Vasa, after a moment, would sort of ask with a hard tone of her voice, how long do you wait for people, Tompkins?
Longer than 3... Wow, that was weird. How do I remember that? I don't know, I guess it depends on the... Like, he just shakes it off again because he remembered something from a long time ago and then shakes it off and goes, it depends. I mean, are they going to the bathroom? Are they going to go shopping?
Vasa would lower her bandaged face, which I'm assuming, like, it looks quite intimidating up close.
Yeah.
Kind of see peaks and kind of looks hard at him with her eyes, which I don't even know what they look like right now. If they're like glowing or anything, or if they got the hollow look. And she says very slowly in like a soft, deadly voice, she says, always longer than 3 weeks. And she makes sure to hold eye contact the entire time.
He's like, why is your face so scary, Vasa? Oh God, Vasa? Wait.
And then actually Vasa's head snaps back at this point. She's like, what?
And he pulls back and he goes, wait, that was you?
And then she goes, how do you know?
Why are you like this?
She would say, how do you know me? And this time she kind of she throws off the air of dignity that she's carried on every time she says, and she just grabs his shoulders, twists him around, and says, how do you know me, Tompkins?
Because you made me come with you to the thing. Why are you old?
And then she goes, you've met me. And then she goes, where are the others?
What do you mean I met you? I met you, but then I guess you died or something. I'm so sorry for your loss. You guys never came back. It was like 3 weeks. I left. Well, not 3 weeks. Like
and then Vasa kind of shakes him hard. She's like, you didn't wait 3 weeks, did you?
Well, there are bigger questions here, like your foliage.
And then she kind of cuffs him hard over the head. She says, you didn't wait 3 weeks, and pokes him.
Did I do this to you?
Pokes him in his little belly and says, you little scrap, snot-nosed, hungry
and
pig.
Orden's pulling you back. He's like, who is this? What is going on? And everyone looks stumped.
And then Vasa whirls around, and you see the fire, almost as if she was young. But obviously, she's this dignified, robed, and she points at Tompkins. She's like, "This little stink didn't wait 3 weeks."
He's like, "I didn't mean to make you die."
And then she says, "Have you seen them again, or did you just leave, you little pig?"
Oh, well, I'm not a pig. And he finishes his bite. But he says, I mean, I saw you guys went into the cave, and then you didn't come out. I tried.
And then Vasa is kind of, she's very still upon hearing this. And then she unceremoniously pushes Tompkins back down into his seat, very thump. And she just goes, "Eat your food, Tompkins. And don't you leave here until I say so."
Where are your friends?
She just says, "Eat."
Ah! And he goes back to eating, and Orden's like, "What is going on?"
And then Vasa kind of looks around, because obviously she's created a bit of a scene that, she's become this sort of legendary time traveler of the city, and everybody just saw her basically bullying this man-child figure. And she straightens her robe, and she says in the sort of quiet but projecting matronly / queenly tone of hers, and she says, "Everything is all right. Return to your meals." Just to sort of calm things down. And then she grabs Orden's upper arm very firmly and says, "We need to talk."
Alright. Like here?
No, and then she says she basically kind of excused herself.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the ceremonial dinner includes like the leaders of the city at the time, just because they are bigger. She very firmly but politely excuses herself to those figures, and then she guides Orden out to discuss at whatever quarters they've been given that have been reserved for them. I'm assuming.
Yep. All right, so you walk into the room. Orden shuts the door, and he says, "Okay, so what is happening? Who is that guy?"
And then Vasa says, with a poorly controlled tremble of excitement in her voice, she says, "We're here. This is my time."
He said his name was Tompkins?
And then Vasa says, "Yes."
That's weird. Anyway, so what are you gonna do?
And then Vasa says, she's kind of repeating to herself. She's like, "This is the time." And then she turns on Orden, and she says, with excitement glowing in her eyes, she says, "Do you know what this means? Look at the city. Look at the people. It's thriving."
Yeah, we did good.
No, she's like, "No, we've done it. We've prevented the fate that befell your people in the time that I came from. We've done it."
And he just kind of looks around, and he's shocked, and he's like, Oh no.
And then Vasa's like,
"Oh,
what?"
No. Okay. And he kind of takes a step forward to you, and he says, "Then you don't have much time."
And then Vasa says, what does that mean?"
And he looks kind of heartbroken, and he says, "The events that occurred to send you back in time are about to happen, right?"
And then Vasa pauses, and she says, "I'm not sure."
They were supposed to. Or rather, they did, but they're not going to now.
And then Vasa pauses and says, what do you think that will mean? Will all my work be undone?"
And he kind of looks around, and he's like, "I don't think so. We're still here. Unless we need to cross that threshold to find out."
And then Vasa says, immediately, she says, "No more jumping. This is the time."
No. I'm not saying jump. I'm saying wait. Or tell me exactly what happened that night, if you can remember.
Vasa says,
or that day.
She doesn't recount the day, but she says, like, "I've told you, we were in the library, and one of the others threw themselves at the crystal and is sent out."
How did you get to the library?
And then Vasa, she pauses, and then her demeanor also changed. The initial excitement is kind of worn off, and she just says quietly, "I don't know. It's been a very long time."
You have to remember.
And then she becomes a little defensive. She says, "Why does it matter?"
Because we don't know what's going to happen. So think about this. You seem to have some kind of time frame for this Tompkins character. So he was supposed to wait for you somewhere, and then he left. So how long until your friends get here? Like days, weeks?
Vasa would pause and say, "Perhaps 1 week."
So they're going to get here in a week, but the event of that night never happened.
And then Vasa will be like, "So what will happen? What will happen to me as I am now? What will happen to you in the city?"
And he kind of smiles, and he says, I don't think anything's going to happen." And he kind of thinks about it more and more, and he's like, "Yeah, I mean, I was really scared for a moment, but what if it's the crystals? The crystals anchor us, so our work isn't undone."
And then Vasa, after a moment, you can see her smile beneath her bandages. She says, "So you say I'm going to look like this forever?"
No. I know it sounds weird. You are, but the other you isn't. The other you's going to get a whole life.
Vasa pauses, and she says, "Huh." At this point, difficult to read her expression, but then she says, we should talk more about this. And then she goes, well, I disappear when the other Vasa arrives.
I don't know. I don't know.
At this point, Vasa would look at Orden and she would say, you know what? She would, after a pause, she would say, it's late. This has been a magnificent revelation. Let us both get rest. So she would go into her quarters, he would go into his quarters, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then once Vasa's in her quarters and it's nighttime and everything, she would wait until about maybe 1 a.m., 2 a.m., whatever, like really dark night. Yeah. And she would actually, at this point, try to sneak into Orden's room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can she do that, or is it locked? I'm assuming it's unlocked because there's trust between them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is he asleep?
Yep.
Well, Vasa would be standing over Orden with a blade in her hand. And she would be standing there for a long time, very still, very silent. And, the intention is obviously clear, but you can tell by how still she is and her eyes that, this is not an easy position for her to be in. At one point, she does raise the blade as if to stab him in the heart or anything like that, but then she lowers it down, and she does this maybe 3 more times. And eventually, the first bird of impending dawn starts chirping, and she realizes she's been standing like that for pretty much 4 hours, and then she tucks it away. She goes back into her bed, and then it's the next day.
So it's the next day. You guys go down for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
As if nothing happened. And Tompkins is there, and he's like, "Hey, you're still here. I didn't know if you'd run away or something."
And then
you told me to stay here. I stayed here.
And Vasa will be like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you're not going to forget that, Tompkins?"
No, I'm good.
Eat, just eat.
Mm-hmm. And he just is bacon.
And then Vasa would. I don't know if she's tired anymore because she's this strange time preserved creature, but she would look more distracted and more fatigued than usual. And at one point she's like, "Orden, walk with me."
Mm-hmm.
And they would be walking the city, and Vasa would say, "This is a beautiful city." And she would say, and you believe her, she said, "I love this city."
I don't know if I like the name Tremessa. I think they made a mistake naming it that, but.
And she just kind of chuckles or whatever, and they're all walking very stately because they have the reputation at this point to uphold.
Yeah.
And then Vasa's just kind of repeating, I love. She would be kind of sort of recounting memories of the places that they've come every few centuries, oh, it's that person, or oh, hey, that girl must be one of Johnner's descendants.
Yeah.
That those freckles always get them every generation, and comments like that. So really reminiscing about the ages that she's watched the city grow. And then at some point, she says to Orden, when they're in a little bit more of a private alcove or whatever, she says, "Old friend, your debt to me is almost paid. What will you do then?"
And he kind of looks down and he says, "Let's not think about that."
And then Vasa, in her typical firm way, she says, "No, we are. Because it is coming, and this is a time that you will have to face."
And he kind of shakes his head and he says, "Vasa, I really don't want to talk about it."
And then Vasa says, "I need to."
And he kind of looks down and he says, "Vasa, I'm not going to be here much longer."
And then this takes Vasa by surprise, and she kind of sits up straight. She's like, "What does that mean?"
It means that I don't know if you've ever gotten curious, but I've gotten curious about where I'm going to be. And I thought about this last night. when you started talking about how this is it, you're about to find your friends, and I was like, well, I asked the same question of myself, so I took a peek, and I've got 2 days left. In 2 days, I'm going to... I guess I'm going to die an old man.
And Vasa says, how is that possible?
Well, besides the fact that I'm old. I mean, it's been a long time.
How old was Orden, by the way, at the age that they met?
He was in his late 30s.
Okay, so he would be like roughly 70 by now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he says, it's taken much more of a toll on me than it has you, I suppose. I keep myself pretty tightly bandaged up, but yeah, I'm sorry I'm not going to get to meet your friends.
Vasa would be very still at this information. And then she says, I'm so sorry, old friend.
We have had a life of friendship that nobody will ever have. I obviously don't want to go, but I'm having a hard time feeling sorry for myself.
And then Vasa would still be shaking her head, remorseful. She says, I stole your dream so that in order to have my debt paid. I have
my
taken
dream
your
was
life.
To restore my city and look at it. It's thriving. It's better than it ever was before. The city that existed where you're from was some kind of archaic, disheveled mess, but full of time zombies or whatever you want to call them. Look at it now. Like, your friends are going to show up here, and they're not going to know what to expect.
And the Vasa just is shaking her head. Like, the remorse almost seems disproportionate to the news that she has been given, but she just seems incredibly remorseful. She's shaking her head and she's just apologizing. Despite whatever he's saying, she says, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm so sorry, old friend.
If it weren't for you, who knows what would have happened to me? Even if I didn't help you, if I didn't repay the debt, what would have happened? I wouldn't have seen how it turns out. Like, I'll never be out of your debt.
And Vasa just says, no, you have paid your debt more times over than you know. And then she's just shaking her head. She says, and then, this goes on for a bit, comforting, remorse, and then eventually, and then they sort of she wears herself out emotionally. And then she kind of, now they're kind of in the just unwinding phase where she kind of goes, what will this city do without its legendary travelers?
Well, it's still going to have you, right?
Well, she says, but I won't travel anymore. Any traveling I do will be on foot, or horseback, or carriage.
You're not going to keep going forward? I mean...
And then Vasa kind of shakes her.
You're going to catch up with your friends, but you're still there. Are both of you going to travel together?
And then Vasa looks over and she says, I suppose I'll just have to kill her. And then she chuckles.
He just cracks up.
Yeah. Yeah, there's moments of silence, very friendly, intimate silence. And then Vasa goes, did you enjoy your jumps?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, like I said, no one's ever going to have a life like we had.
And then Vasa kind of says, and no one should, but we were privileged to have done it.
That's true.
Yeah. At that point, Vasa kind of she shoulder hugs him, and they almost, the energy is almost a little bit youthful, as if they were,
yeah.
Obviously they let down their whole prestigious appearance and,
right.
and guard when they're in private. And then she goes, well, old friend, let us make the most of these remaining days before time finally catches up to us.
And he kind of nods and he says, I do. It'll help me go easier if I know what you're going to do, though.
If I disappear, then I disappear.
Right.
If I continue, I suppose I will carry on as we have. I no longer have a place in time. I've lived more than any person should. I will remain the city's legendary traveler.
I hope that you remember that you didn't just shape this city in the past. Like, your actions from when we first started this are not what caused this to happen. What caused this to happen was the fact that you were in this city's life and heart and blood for its whole existence. Like, I would be very sad to think that you believed that the one thing you did long ago was what made this city great, and not the fact that it always had you.
And Vasa kind of looks over and she says, "It had us."
I helped.
And then she kind of, now's no time for modesty, thousands of years and you never managed to have a bit of pride.
Thousands of years for them, not for us, but, so let's go make a day of it, I guess. Yep, so the rest of that day, you guys, travel, you experience all the same favorite places that you have always gone to, but you do it bigger and better. You celebrate as much as you can. You meet up with the grandkids and the great-grandkids and the great-great-great-great-great-grandkids of friends and family that you had known throughout your time in Tremessa, and before that, Majoa. It is late in the night. You guys have had another great dinner, and you guys are walking kind of on the outskirts of the city, and you're by that same pond, the same pond that he had the idea to do this jumping thing before. Mm-hmm. And he says, "I think I want to sit down here."
And then Vasa sits down with him.
Mm-hmm. And he says, "I always kind of wish that squirrel would show back up."
I thought it did.
Well, I mean, like, again and again, like a time-traveling squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that would have been a bigger legacy for me. It's like a really cool squirrel that, like, jumps through time. Like, the city is cool and all, but I really was hoping, like, that first burst of energy would have created some kind of, like, mega squirrel.
And Vasa just kind of laughs and says, "Why would you condemn a squirrel to turn out as hideous as we have? Let it live its little furry life and die in
You're right.
peace."
Maybe someone killed it already, because it was, like,
I would have killed it.
Yeah, see, I mean, yeah, poor squirrel.
I'm surprised our city members haven't stoned us. Look at us, Orin. But at the same time, even as she's like holding up her hands, you can tell that she actually loves her form. She's grown accustomed to it. She loves all the travel and memories that she has earned through this shriveled bandaged form.
And he looks down at his hands, and the bandages are loose. And he looks down at his other hand, and his bandages are loose, and you can see the bandages are starting to sag off of him. And he looks really sad, and he says, "Oh no." And he reaches up to your face and kind of pushes in the bandages that are now loose.
And then Vasa says, "What's happening?"
"Well, I know what's happening to me." And he looks up at you and he sees that it's happening to you too.
Mm-hmm.
I dragged you all the way to the end, I guess.
And then Vasa says, "I have enjoyed myself every jump of the way."
No. You are going to disagree with me on this.
And then Vasa kind of says, she interrupts him with a very warning tone. "Orden?"
Listen to me right now. I don't have the strength to do this. You need to do this. Please.
And then she says, "What?"
You need to leave me here. Say your goodbyes. Go find Tompkins. Give him your memory crystal.
And then the Vasa says, "What good will that do? What are you talking about?"
So that he can give it to Vasa, and that you can live on.
And then Vasa says, in a way, she says, "Why do I need to?"
It's important to me.
And then Vasa says, she's always been the more reserved one in terms of this whole time. She says, everyone has a place in time, Orden. Everyone. We don't need to. We have dedicated our lives to being outside of it and escaping it in a sense. We don't need to. It's time to return.
You can, but I'm just saying that if you give your crystal to yourself, then you'll remember. Because the Vasa that's coming here soon will never know the life that you lived. And she should.
And then Vasa, she kind of looks up at this, and this is, a woman who has lived and seen thousands of years, trying to recall essentially the young woman that she used to be. And she says to herself, she says, "I don't know if she should."
I think she should. Please.
And then Vasa very, very gently, very compassionately takes Orden's hand, and she says, "I will think about it, old friend." And then after a moment she says, "But what about your crystal?"
And he says,
And she says,
and he coughs for a minute, and he says, "Seriously, I don't know that if someone can what we know is too dangerous. After I pass, you should probably just have it destroyed."
And then Vasa pauses, and she kind of chuckles ruefully at this point. She says, "Once I would have agreed with you more than you even know." But then she says, "I will take your crystal."
But this is my last wish. Please let Vasa know.
I have no right to impose my life on that young girl.
It'll be like reading a book, though. You're not going to give her your emotions. No one will ever share what you had. But she should be able to read about it, and that's what the crystal will give her. Please. And he coughs up again.
And then Vasa is like looking down at her friend, who's clearly kind of slowly dying, visibly almost.
Yeah.
And then she sounds so reluctant, as if, and then she says, "I promise, old friend."
And he kind of squeezes your hand tight one last time. And that's all he was waiting for. And then after that, he's gone. He lets out one last bit of air. His body's still there. It sounds morbid, but you weren't sure if he was going to, fade or turn to sand or who knows what else. But unfortunately, he just dies.
So Vasa would have spent the night basically staying at that pond holding his body. Yeah. And then as day came, does she have any magical ability or anything? Because I don't know if she'll physically carry him back into the city, but something.
No magical ability. She has just the crystal's powers of jumping and forward and stuff. So
she has Orden's crystal in her hand, in her robe pocket, I believe.
Yeah.
And is the pond in the city? Where is it?
It's right outside the city.
It's right outside the city. So as day came, she would have knocked on the gates, summoned somebody, and says, fetch a crew of men for one of the two, capitalized two as they're known, has passed. And prepare the city hall or something like that.
They immediately take off and they run, and you can feel yourself cough. And so you start walking in the streets. They take the body, and as soon as they do, you cough one more time, and you can feel the bandages start to slip off of you. And you realize that you don't know how much longer you have.
Yeah. So Vasa, as they whisk the body off in something, the first thing she does is actually go to the city leader.
Yeah.
She immediately requests an urgent, and then she tells the city leader, she says, the era of our guardianship of the city is coming to a close. This is what must happen. The bodies, I want a memorial built for my friend and I. My friend will be laid to rest, and soon, should I pass, I want to be laid next to him. And then she actually pulls out the blue crystal, the crystal that is Orden's.
Yeah.
And she says, "This shall be laid with our bodies." And then she basically lays out the design for the whole monument. It's an incredible tomb, right? It's beautiful and at the same time simple, but the point is that incredibly secure.
Yeah.
And that the crystal will be laid on the body, which will be in the tomb, which will be covered by stone and marble and all that stuff, and it will have inscribed on almost like a sarcophagus-like style. All the walls will be inscribed with the history of like their place in this city.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says, and the tomb itself will be buried deep, such that the actual monuments above it are the only way you would know that they're two robed figures clutching their staves, bandaged. And it's like these two monuments, and deep, deep, deep below is the actual burial of the bodies with the crystals, far below any way that they should ever actually be. This crystal, and then she holds up hers, and she says, "This crystal will come to you later. My body may come to you first. Like, I may pass before this crystal arrives, but when it does, and hold my body until you have received this crystal as well, and then bury me in the same way." And then she sort of just says, and then she lays her hand on his shoulder and says, "It has been the utmost privilege and pleasure watching the city grow. I love it, and I know you love it, and may Trimessa prosper forever."
And he's beside himself. He can barely get a word out. But yeah, he has absorbed completely what you told him to do.
Mm. And then Vasa says, and then Vasa bids him goodbye, and then she goes to the mess hall, where she guesses that Tompkins may be.
Tompkins may, in fact, be indulging in a post-breakfast breakfast.
Yes.
No one else is there, but he's having a good time.
She walks up behind him and just grabs his chubby little cheek as it's chomping down on something, just to give it a little shake.
"Oh, hey, Vasa."
Yeah. And she says, "Try to chew quietly, because I'm about to tell you something very important. Tompkins, I need you to give this," and she holds up the crystal. Mm-hmm. "I need you to give this to the young Vasa when she shows up at the city."
"They gave you a crystal?"
"I need you to give this to the young Vasa when she shows up at the city. Do you understand, Tompkins?"
Mm-hmm.
"Repeat it back to me."
"You told me to..." He's trying to chew. "Give this to young Vasa."
"Give what to young Vasa?"
"The crystal that I need to get from you."
"This is a very important crystal. Do you understand?"
And he kind of like pulls himself forward, and he has a different demeanor than you used to. And he says, I understand." And
then Vasa, in seeing this subtle difference, she kind of quiets herself. Her tone no longer is as patronizing or as commanding.
Yeah.
And then she takes his hand and very firmly, but also gently places the crystal in his hands. And then she says, "I'm counting on you, Tompkins. You need to give this to Vasa. Keep it safe, and give it to Vasa when she appears."
And he gives you a very stern look, like, absolutely. And you feel like you're looking at like a different Tompkins, and you're not quite sure why. Like, it's more than just he's like, "Yeah, no problem, boss." Like, almost like some of the childlike faults or qualities, depending on who you are, have faded away, and he says, "Absolutely."
Okay. And then Vasa opens her mouth as if to like say something or as if to repeat again, but then she closes it, and then she lets him have his hand, and she like presses the hand with the crystal to his chest, and then she kind of ruffles his hair for the first time, really.
Yeah.
And then she says, "Thank you, Tompkins. You've done well." And then she kind of says something. She's like, "And eat slower. I don't want you to choke on your food before I appear."
All right.
For goodness sake.
Once you hit the streets, you start kind of, you know that you're going to start stumbling, and you don't want people to see that. So you take some of the more back alleys and some of the more side streets. Yeah. And when you're finally out of strength, you find yourself before a familiar looking house.
Yeah. Then it's that house.
It's the house. You finally made it.
It's that house. And then Vasa, at this point, she just kind of like, she laughs. She coughs.
It's for sale. There's no one in there.
she places her hands on her hips in a very familiar gesture, and then she kind of sighs and she enters the house. And I'm assuming she has like little stuff in her robes and all.
Yep.
She navigates to the wall. She sees the window. She sees the wall, and then she goes, "Oh, grandmother!" And then she looks at herself and she's like, kind of has a skeptical expression on her face, as if she like is anybody to call anybody a grandmother? And she pulls out her little stencil thing, and then she writes in flowing script, not the rushed script that was before. She writes in very neat flowing script. She writes, "They have the crystals." And then,
Yep. And then, so you head back to your quarters, you make it just in time, and you lay down one last time.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to World Walkers. I want to give thanks to Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. That's where we got a lot of the music from today's episode. Bittersweet, Disquiet, Floating Cities, Full On, Heavy Heart, Killers, Lost Frontier, Lost Time, and Spring Thaw are all the names of the tracks that we used. So definitely wanted to give them a shout out and thank that entire site for making this episode sound a lot better than it would have. The sand you heard in today's episode was courtesy of freesoundeffects.co.uk. And also, thanks again, as always, to Sirenscape, who provided some of the sound effects you heard today. Visit them at sirenscape.com.
That was awesome! Are you fucking kidding me? Was that not awesome? That was awesome!
That was pretty sweet.
That was awesome! Dude, I was like, how's this gonna go? Because I have no fucking clue.